The bullet grazed so close to Willow Harper's ear that she felt the heat of it before she heard the crack of the gunshot. And in that moment, frozen behind the general store counter with her hands full of fabric bolts, she understood that her quiet life had just shattered like dropped china. The year was 1883, and Tucumcari, New Mexico, was supposed to be settling down, becoming civilized, but the four men who burst through the door of Harper's mercantile looked like they had ridden straight out of hell itself. Dust covered their faces, their eyes were wild, and the leader, a scarred man with a twisted mouth, leveled his revolver at Willow's father behind the counter. "The money, old man. Now." Willow's father, George Harper, was 62 and had survived the war, 2 droughts and a rattlesnake bite that should have killed him. He reached slowly for the cash box beneath the counter, his weathered hand steady. Willow stood perfectly still, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She had lived in Tucumcari her entire 20 years, had never ventured more than 10 miles from this store, had never even danced with a man at the town socials because her father needed her help and because she was too shy, too uncertain, too afraid of making a fool of herself. The door flew open again, and this time, it was not another outlaw but a cowboy who moved with the swift grace of a mountain cat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of winter sky. The gun in his hand spoke before he did, the shot perfectly placed to send the leader's revolver spinning across the floor. "That's enough," the cowboy said, his voice low and steady as a river. The next few minutes were chaos. The outlaws scattered, one diving through the window in a shower of glass, another trying to grab the cowboy from behind. Willow watched as the stranger moved through the fight like he was dancing, each motion precise and purposeful. When it was over, 3 of the outlaws were fleeing on horseback down the dusty main street, and the leader was on the floor, groaning and clutching his shoulder where the cowboy's second shot had found its mark. The sheriff arrived then, huffing and red-faced, to take the wounded man into custody. The cowboy holstered his gun and turned to Willow and her father, tipping his hat. "Name's Benjamin Kane. I've been tracking these men for 3 weeks. Appreciate you folks staying calm." Willow found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "You saved our lives." Benjamin's eyes met hers, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "Just doing what needed doing, miss." Her father clapped Benjamin on the shoulder with genuine warmth. "George Harper, and this is my daughter Willow. You'll stay for supper. I won't hear any arguments." That was how Benjamin Kane entered Willow's life. And in the weeks that followed, she discovered that a person's entire world could shift on its axis without them even realizing it was happening. Benjamin had been hired by the territorial marshal to track down the outlaw gang that had been terrorizing settlements from Santa Fe to the Texas border. With their leader captured and the others scattered, he found himself with time on his hands and a growing reluctance to move on to the next job. He started showing up at the mercantile, ostensibly to buy supplies, but Willow noticed he never seemed to need much. A tin of coffee one day, some ammunition the next, a new bandana that he did not really need because the one around his neck looked perfectly fine. Each time he lingered, talking with her father about the territory, about the cattle business, about nothing in particular. And each time, his eyes found Willow, watching her as she measured out flour or folded cloth or arranged the new shipment of canned goods on the shelves. Willow had never been courted before. She had never even been noticed much, being plain in her own estimation, with light brown hair she wore in a practical bun and a dusting of freckles across her nose that made her look younger than her years. She was slender from hard work and good at disappearing into the background. But Benjamin looked at her like she was something remarkable, and it terrified her as much as it thrilled her. "Your daughter is uncommonly kind," Benjamin told her father one afternoon when Willow had spent 20 minutes helping old Mrs. Chen find exactly the right buttons for her grandson's new shirt. George Harper smiled. "She has her mother's heart." Lost her wife 10 years back, and Willow stepped into shoes too big for a girl of 10. Never complained once. Benjamin absorbed this information, his expression thoughtful. That evening, when Willow was closing up the store, sweeping the wooden floor clean of the day's dust and dirt, he appeared in the doorway with his hat in his hands. "Miss Harper, I was wondering if you might walk with me, just to the plaza. It's a fine evening." Willow's first instinct was to refuse. She had work to do, inventory to count, a torn seam in her dress to mend. But something in Benjamin's eyes made her set down the broom and untie her apron. "I would like that, Mr. Kane." "Benjamin," he said softly, "please." They walked through Tucumcari, as the sun painted the desert sky in shades of orange and pink. Benjamin told her about growing up in Colorado, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16 and making his way south, working ranches and taking odd jobs until he fell into tracking work. "Never meant to make a living with a gun," he admitted as they sat on a bench in the small plaza, the evening air cooling around them. "But I am good at finding people, good at reading signs, and there is satisfaction in bringing bad men to justice. Do you ever get tired of it?" Willow asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "The traveling, I mean. The danger." Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Lately, yes. Lately I find myself thinking there might be something better than a bedroll under the stars and a different town every week." Willow did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just sat beside him as the first stars appeared overhead. When he walked her home, his hand brushed hers, and the brief contact sent electricity up her arm. The weeks stretched into a month, and then another. Benjamin found work at the largest ranch outside town, the Triple Creek, owned by a cattle baron named Marcus Webb. The pay was decent, and more importantly, it kept him in Tucumcari. He visited the mercantile almost daily now, and the whole town had started to notice. Women gossiped about it over their shopping. Men teased Benjamin good-naturedly when he came into the saloon. "When are you going to make it official, Kane?" asked Tom Bradley, the blacksmith, one evening. "Everyone can see you are gone over her." Benjamin nursed his whiskey, a small smile playing at his lips. "When I am certain she will say yes. That girl has been watching you like you hung the moon since the day you walked in," Tom laughed. "Trust me, she will say yes." But Benjamin was cautious, methodical. He had spent his adult life tracking, observing, making sure of his ground before he made a move. He knew Willow was shy, knew she had lived a sheltered life. He did not want to rush her or frighten her. So he courted her slowly, properly, always respectful, always a gentleman. He brought her small gifts: a hair ribbon from the trader who passed through town, a book of poetry he had carried in his saddlebag for years, wildflowers picked from the desert, their blooms defiant and beautiful against the harsh landscape. Willow treasured each offering, pressing the flowers between the pages of her Bible, reading the poems by candlelight until she had memorized them. Her father watched the courtship with approval, seeing in Benjamin a good man, steady and true. "He is different from most of the drifters who come through," George told his daughter one evening as they ate dinner together. "That one has roots in him, just waiting for the right soil." Willow blushed but could not help smiling. She had never been happier, never felt more alive. Every day brought new discoveries. She learned that Benjamin could make her laugh with his dry observations about town characters, that he had read more books than she would have expected from a cowboy, that he was gentle with animals and children, patient with the elderly, and respectful to everyone regardless of their station. And she learned, slowly, that she was falling in love with him. It was a revelation and a terror all at once. Love was something that happened in the novels she occasionally read when the store was quiet, not something she had ever expected to experience herself. But there was no denying the way her heart lifted when she saw him riding down the street, the way time seemed to slow when they talked, the way she lay awake at night thinking about the sound of his voice, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the strength in his hands. September arrived, and with it came the announcement that the town would be holding a harvest dance. The event was a tradition, held in the large barn on the edge of town, with musicians brought in from Santa Fe and tables laden with food prepared by every family in the territory. Willow had attended every year, always helping to serve, always watching from the sidelines as couples whirled across the floor. She had never danced. Her father had tried to teach her when she was young, but after her mother died, there had been no music in their house, no joy for such things. At the town dances, she told herself she preferred to watch, that she had 2 left feet anyway, that it did not matter. But this year, with Benjamin in her life, the thought of the dance filled her with both anticipation and anxiety. 3 days before the event, Benjamin appeared at the mercantile just as Willow was helping her father close up. He looked nervous, his hat rotating in his hands, and when George tactfully excused himself to check the stockroom, Benjamin cleared his throat. "Willow, I would be honored if you would attend the harvest dance with me," her heart hammered. "I do not know how to dance." "I will teach you," he said simply, "if you will trust me." She looked into his eyes, those winter sky eyes that had become so dear to her, and found herself nodding. "Yes, I will trust you." The next 3 evenings after the store closed, Benjamin came to the small house behind the mercantile where Willow and her father lived. They moved the furniture in the parlor to the walls, and while George sat in his chair reading the newspaper and pretending not to watch, Benjamin taught Willow to dance. At first, she was stiff as a board, terrified of stepping on his feet, of looking foolish. But Benjamin was patient, his hand steady on her waist and hand, his voice low and encouraging. "Just follow me. Do not think about the steps, just feel the music. I have got you." There was no music, not really, just Benjamin humming a waltz tune his mother had taught him years ago. But gradually, Willow relaxed into his lead. She discovered that dancing was like a conversation without words, a give and take, a trust. When Benjamin moved, she moved. When he turned, she turned. And slowly, miraculously, they were dancing. "There," Benjamin said, his voice warm with pride. "You are a natural." "I am going to trip and take us both down at the actual dance," Willow said, but she was smiling, breathless with the joy of movement, of being held by him. "Even if you do, I will catch you. Always." The night of the harvest dance arrived with perfect weather, cool and clear, the stars bright overhead. Willow wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had been her mother's, altered to fit her slender frame. She had spent an hour on her hair, pinning it up in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun, letting a few tendrils curl loose around her face. When Benjamin arrived to escort her and her father to the barn, the look on his face made every minute of effort worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. The barn was transformed. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light over the space. Tables lined the walls, groaning with food. A 4-piece band was set up in the corner, the fiddler already tuning his instrument. People crowded the space, dressed in their finest, laughing and talking. The air smelled of hay and perfume, and the spice cake that Mrs. Bradley was famous for. Willow's stomach fluttered with nerves. She stood close to Benjamin, drawing strength from his presence as they greeted neighbors and friends. Everyone was friendly, welcoming, teasing Benjamin about keeping Willow all to himself. When the music started, couples flooded onto the floor. Benjamin turned to Willow, extending his hand with a small bow that was both playful and courtly. "Miss Harper, may I have this dance?" She placed her hand in his, her mouth dry, her heart racing. "You may." He led her onto the floor, and Willow was acutely aware of everyone watching them. She had spent her whole life being invisible, and now she was the center of attention, about to make a fool of herself in front of the entire town. But then Benjamin's hand settled on her waist, warm and solid, and his other hand clasped hers, and he looked down at her with such confidence and tenderness that the rest of the world seemed to fade away. "Remember," he murmured, "just follow me. I've got you." The music swelled, and Benjamin moved, and Willow moved with him. At first, she was conscious of every step, counting in her head, terrified of making a mistake. But Benjamin led with such assurance, his movements so smooth and easy, that gradually she stopped thinking and simply let herself be guided. They swept across the floor, and Willow felt something remarkable happening. The nervousness ebbed away, replaced by pure exhilaration. Benjamin spun her gently, and she laughed with surprise and delight. He pulled her close again, and they moved together as if they had been dancing for years, not days. She felt weightless, free, like she was flying. The barn, the people, the entire world seemed to blur around them until there was only Benjamin, only the music, only this perfect moment. His eyes never left hers, and in their depths she saw everything she felt reflected back at her: love, joy, belonging. When the song ended, there was a heartbeat of silence and then applause. Willow blinked, suddenly remembering where they were, seeing the smiling faces of their neighbors surrounding them. She was breathing hard, her cheeks flushed, still held in Benjamin's arms. "That was wonderful," she whispered. "You were wonderful," he corrected, and there was something in his voice, something deep and true that made her heart skip. They danced 3 more times that night, and each dance was easier than the last, more natural. Willow discovered she loved it, loved the freedom of movement, the closeness to Benjamin, the music thrumming through her body. Between dances, they ate and talked with friends, and Willow felt more a part of the community than she ever had before. She was not just George Harper's shy daughter anymore. She was Willow, Benjamin Kane's girl, a young woman in love and loved in return. When the evening was winding down, Benjamin led her outside for some air. The night had grown cold, and he shrugged out of his jacket to drape it over her shoulders. They walked away from the barn, away from the noise and light, until they stood alone under the vast New Mexico sky. "Willow," Benjamin said, and his voice was serious now, intent. He took both her hands in his, facing her. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. You have given me something I did not even know I was searching for." Her breath caught. "What is that?" "Home, purpose, a reason to stay in one place. Before I met you, I was just drifting, going wherever the work took me. But now I cannot imagine being anywhere you are not." Tears pricked Willow's eyes. "Benjamin, I feel the same. I have lived in Tucumcari my whole life, but I was not really living until you came. You have shown me things about myself I never knew. You have made me brave." He reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek with infinite tenderness. "Willow Harper, I love you. I love your kindness and your strength. I love the way you care for people. I love your laugh, your smile, the way you blush when I compliment you. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me?" The tears spilled over now, but they were tears of joy. Yes, yes, Benjamin, I will marry you. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held promise and passion and a future full of possibility. When they finally drew apart, both breathless, Willow felt transformed, like she had shed an old skin and emerged into someone new, someone capable of anything. They were married 6 weeks later, in October, when the cottonwoods along the creek turned gold and the air held the first hints of winter. The ceremony took place in the small church at the center of town, with half of Tucumcari in attendance. Willow wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Benjamin had ordered from Santa Fe, and when she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes found Benjamin's and did not waver. He looked handsome in his Sunday best, his dark hair neatly combed, his expression solemn with the weight of the moment. But when she reached him and took his hands, he smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about becoming one flesh, about the sanctity of marriage. Willow heard the words as if from a distance, too focused on Benjamin, on the feel of his hands holding hers, on the reality that this was happening, that she was truly marrying this man she loved with her whole heart. "I do," she said when the moment came, her voice clear and strong. "I do," Benjamin echoed, and then he was kissing her and everyone was cheering and they were married. The celebration that followed was joyous and loud, with food and music and dancing. This time, when Willow danced, she did so with confidence, secure in Benjamin's arms, no longer the shy girl who had never danced with a man before. She was a wife now, a woman embarking on a new chapter of her life. George Harper pulled her aside as the party was winding down, his eyes misty. "Your mother would be so proud of you, so happy. Benjamin is a good man and he loves you fiercely. Be happy, my girl." "I will, Papa, I promise." Benjamin had bought a small ranch 10 miles outside Tucumcari, a property with a sturdy house, a barn, and enough land to run cattle and horses. He had saved his money carefully over the years, and with the addition of Willow's small inheritance from her mother, they had enough to start their life together on solid ground. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Willow had lived her whole life in town, used to the sounds of wagons passing, neighbors calling to each other, the bustle of the mercantile. The ranch was quieter, more isolated, with only the wind and the calls of coyotes at night for company. But she found she loved it, loved the space and freedom, loved waking up beside Benjamin each morning, loved building a home together. Benjamin proved to be a devoted husband. He was up before dawn to tend the animals and work the land, but he always made time for Willow, listening to her thoughts and dreams, sharing his own. They worked side by side, building something together, and their love deepened with each passing day. In their second year of marriage, Willow discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Benjamin became even more protective, insisting Willow not overwork herself, hiring a young Mexican woman named Rosa from town to come help with the heavier chores. "I am not made of glass," Willow protested, but she was touched by his care. "You are carrying our child," Benjamin said, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "Our future. I will not take any chances." Their son was born in the spring of 1885, during a thunderstorm that shook the ranch house. The labor was long and difficult, but when Willow finally held the baby in her arms, all the pain was forgotten. He had Benjamin's dark hair and what looked like Willow's hazel eyes, and he was perfect. They named him Matthew George Kane, after Benjamin's father and Willow's. Benjamin held his son with a tenderness that made Willow fall even more in love with him, watching this strong, capable man reduced to awe by a tiny infant. "I never knew I could love like this," Benjamin said, his voice thick with emotion. "You and him, you are everything." The years flowed past like the creek that ran through their property. Matthew grew into a lively, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, desperate to learn about horses and cattle and the land. 2 years after Matthew came Emma, a daughter with Willow's smile and Benjamin's stubborn determination. Then, 3 years later, Samuel, who was quieter than his siblings but whose mind was sharp as a tack. The ranch prospered. Benjamin's hard work and knowledge, combined with Willow's careful management of their finances, allowed them to expand their holdings. They hired hands to help with the cattle drives, built a larger barn, bought more land. Willow kept a garden that was the envy of the county, and she continued to help at her father's store when she could, bringing the children with her. George Harper aged gracefully, content in his role as grandfather, spoiling his grandchildren and taking pride in his daughter's happiness. He never remarried, saying that he had loved once and that was enough, but he was not lonely. His family surrounded him, and he lived to see Matthew enter school, to teach Emma her letters, to hold baby Samuel. Life was not without its challenges. There were droughts that tested their resources, years when the cattle prices were low and money was tight. There was the time when Matthew broke his arm falling from the barn loft, and Willow and Benjamin spent a terrified night riding to fetch the doctor. There was the winter when influenza swept through the territory, and they barricaded themselves at the ranch, praying their family would be spared. But through everything, Willow and Benjamin stood together, their love a constant in an ever-changing world. They still danced, sometimes in the privacy of their parlor after the children were asleep, Benjamin humming the same waltz he had taught her all those years ago, Willow still feeling like she was flying when he held her. On their 15th anniversary, Benjamin surprised Willow with a trip. He had arranged for Rosa to stay with the children for a week, and he took Willow to Santa Fe, where they stayed in a hotel that felt impossibly fancy after years of ranch life. They attended a real dance, with an orchestra and women in gowns and men in suits. Willow wore a dress Benjamin had bought her, deep green silk that made her eyes shine, and when they took to the dance floor, she remembered that first harvest dance, how terrified she had been, how new everything had felt. "I am glad I took a chance on you," she said as they waltzed. Benjamin laughed. "I seem to recall I was the one taking a chance, teaching a woman to dance who swore she had 2 left feet. You always saw something in me I could not see in myself," Willow said seriously. "You made me believe I could fly. No, my love, you always had wings. I just helped you remember how to use them." They returned to the ranch renewed, ready to face whatever came next. The children grew older, more independent. Matthew proved to have his father's way with horses and started training them to sell. Emma developed a talent for drawing and could spend hours sketching the landscape around them. Samuel, true to his quiet nature, loved books and would read anything he could get his hands on. George Harper passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, when Willow was 39. They buried him next to his wife in the Tucumcari cemetery, and though Willow grieved deeply, she found comfort in knowing he had lived a full life, surrounded by love. She took over the mercantile, running it with the same care her father had, though she hired a manager to handle the day-to-day operations so she could still focus on her family. The Wild West that Willow and Benjamin had known in their youth was changing. By the late 1890s, the territory was more settled, more civilized. The railroad had expanded, bringing goods and people from the east. Towns grew into small cities. The violence and lawlessness that had characterized the earlier years faded, replaced by schools and churches and stability. But some things remained constant. the land harsh and beautiful, the sky endless and clear, and the love between Willow and Benjamin, tested by time and trial, stronger than ever. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. The whole community came, friends and neighbors who had watched their love story unfold over the decades. There was music and dancing, and when Benjamin took Willow's hand and led her onto the cleared space that served as a dance floor, everyone stopped to watch. They were older now. Benjamin's hair had gone silver at the temples, and lines creased his face. Willow had laugh lines around her eyes and mouth, and her hands bore the marks of a lifetime of work. But when they danced, they moved with the same grace they had shown at that harvest dance a quarter-century before. Benjamin led, strong and sure, and Willow followed, trusting completely, and together they whirled under the New Mexico sky. Matthew, 23 now and courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, watched his parents with a smile. "That is what I want," he told his siblings. "What they have." Emma, 21 and engaged to a young lawyer in town, nodded. They still look at each other like they are the only two people in the world. Samuel, 18 and preparing to leave for university in the fall, felt a lump in his throat. "I hope I find someone who loves me the way they love each other." As the party wound down and guests departed, Willow and Benjamin stood together on the porch of their home, watching the stars emerge. Benjamin's arm was around Willow's waist, her head rested on his shoulder, and they were silent, content in each other's presence. "You remember that day in the mercantile?" Benjamin finally asked. "When those outlaws came in, how could I forget? You burst through that door like an avenging angel. I thought I was seeing things. I took one look at you standing there, so scared but so brave, and something in me just knew. I knew you were going to change my life." Willow turned to face him, reaching up to touch his cheek. "You taught me to dance, not just the steps but the dance of life. You showed me I could be more than I thought I was. And you gave me a reason to stop running. A home, a family, everything that matters." They kissed, tender and sweet, a kiss that held 25 years of love, of partnership, of choosing each other every single day. When they drew apart, both were smiling. "Come on," Benjamin said, taking her hand. "Let us go inside. I want to dance with my wife one more time before we turn in." In the parlor of their ranch house, by lamplight, with no music but the beating of their hearts, Benjamin Kane and Willow Harper Kane danced. They moved slowly, savoring the moment, and Willow closed her eyes and let herself be transported back to that first dance, when she had been terrified, and he had been patient, when she had never danced with a man before, and he had led her gently and made her feel like she was flying. She felt that way still, even after all these years, flying, free, completely and utterly loved. Their children grew and married and gave them grandchildren. The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations. And always, at every family gathering, there was music and dancing, a tradition that started with a shy young woman who had never danced and a cowboy who taught her how. Years later, when Willow and Benjamin were old and gray, they would sit on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the New Mexico desert. Their children and grandchildren would visit, filling the house with noise and laughter, and they would smile at each other, knowing they had built something good, something lasting. On Benjamin's 75th birthday, weak from age but still stubborn as ever, he insisted on one last dance with Willow. Their grandson brought out a phonograph, a modern marvel that would have seemed like magic in their youth, and played a waltz. Benjamin stood slowly, offering his hand to Willow with the same courtly gesture he had used that night at the harvest dance 52 years before. "May I have this dance, Miss Harper?" "You may, Mr. Kane." They moved slowly now, their steps smaller, their movements careful. But the connection was still there, the trust, the love. Willow rested her head against Benjamin's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt his arms around her, still strong despite the years, still protecting, still loving. "Thank you," Benjamin whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For saying yes. For trusting me. For dancing with me. For this life." Willow felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Thank you for teaching me to fly." Benjamin Kane passed peacefully 2 months later in his sleep with Willow holding his hand. She grieved deeply, feeling like half of herself was missing. But she did not regret a single moment of their life together. They had had 53 years of marriage, years filled with love and laughter, hard work and joy, children and grandchildren, and always, always, they had each other. At Benjamin's funeral, the whole county turned out. He had been respected and loved, known for his integrity, his kindness, his devotion to his family. As they lowered his casket into the ground, Willow stood straight and dry-eyed, her children and grandchildren surrounding her. She would mourn, but she would not break. Benjamin had taught her to be strong, to stand tall, to fly. Willow lived for 5 more years, spending her time with her family, managing the ranch alongside Matthew, teaching her granddaughters to bake and her grandsons to read. She spoke often of Benjamin, keeping his memory alive, telling stories of their courtship and marriage to anyone who would listen. On the anniversary of that first harvest dance, now 60 years past, Willow sat in her parlor looking through old photographs. There was one of her and Benjamin on their wedding day, young and hopeful. One of them with baby Matthew. One from their 25th anniversary party. So many memories, so much love. That night, she dreamed she was young again, standing in the barn at the harvest dance. Benjamin was there, extending his hand, that smile on his face that had always made her heart skip. She took his hand and they began to dance, whirling across the floor, and she felt light as air, weightless, flying. The music swelled around them and they danced and danced and danced, and Willow was happy, so perfectly, completely happy. She passed in her sleep that night, a smile on her face, and when her family found her in the morning, they knew she had gone to be with Benjamin, to dance with him again. They buried her next to him under the wide New Mexico sky, and on her headstone, beneath her name and dates, her children had inscribed, "She danced through life with grace and love, and now she flies with angels above." The ranch continued through the generations, the story of Benjamin and Willow passed down as family legend, a testament to the power of love, of trust, of taking a chance on something new. And sometimes, on clear nights when the stars were bright and the wind was gentle, those who lived on the land swore they could hear music drifting across the desert, and if they looked carefully, they might see 2 figures dancing in the starlight, flying together as they had always done, as they would do for all eternity. Their love story became part of Tucumcari's history, told and retold, embellished and cherished. The shy girl who had never danced and the cowboy who taught her how, who built a life together out of love and hard work, who raised children and prospered and never stopped dancing, never stopped flying. It was a love story for the ages, simple and profound, a reminder that the greatest adventures are not always found in travel or violence or dramatic events, but in the quiet moments, the small gestures, the daily choice to love and be loved. Benjamin had saved Willow's life that day in the mercantile, but more than that, he had taught her to truly live. And she had given him the home and purpose he had been searching for, had shown him that putting down roots did not mean giving up freedom, but rather finding a different kind of liberation. Together they had danced through life, and their legacy lived on in their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, all of whom learned that love is not just a feeling but an action, a commitment, a dance that requires trust and patience and the willingness to let someone else lead sometimes, and to lead in turn. The mercantile in Tucumcari remained in the family for 3 more generations, and visitors who came through could still see the place where it all started, where bullets flew and a cowboy burst through the door to save a shy young woman who did not know her life was about to change forever. The old-timers would tell the story to anyone who asked, pointing to the spot where Benjamin had stood, where Willow had hidden behind the counter, where fate had brought 2 souls together in a moment of violence that transformed into a lifetime of love. And on warm evenings in Tucumcari, when families gathered for town dances that continued the tradition started so long ago, there would always be someone remembering Benjamin and Willow, their first dance, their last dance, all the dances in between. Their story became woven into the fabric of the community, a reminder of what was possible when 2 people found each other and chose to build something beautiful together. The Wild West faded into history, becoming legend and myth, but some truths remained constant. Love endures, trust matters. And sometimes, when you are brave enough to take someone's hand and let them lead you into the unknown, you discover you can fly after all.